Imagine that every experience in your life, whether joyful or painful, carries a deeper meaning. What if nothing happened by chance, but instead, every event unfolded for a purpose? Ancient wisdom teaches that life is not a series of random occurrences, but rather a path of learning, growth, and transformation. Every moment, every challenge, every triumph is a step on this journey towards self-discovery. When you begin to see life through this lens, you stop resisting what happens and start embracing it as part of a larger story, one that is guiding you exactly where you need to be. Nothing in life is permanent. Everything changes. Our emotions, relationships, the seasons, even our own bodies. The nature of existence itself is one of constant transformation. And yet, suffering arises when we resist this truth, when we try to hold on to moments that are destined to pass or push away difficulties before their time. True peace does not come from clinging or resisting, but from learning to move with life's flow, accepting each stage with openness rather than fear. Think of a river. It does not stop or hold on to a particular form. It moves freely, adapting to the land, embracing every twist and turn. A tree does not grieve when its leaves fall in autumn. It knows that new ones will come in spring. In the same way, we too must learn to let go of what no longer serves us, trusting that each change leads to new opportunities for growth. When we accept impermanence, we are no longer afraid of losing what we have, nor do we suffer over what we lack. Instead, we live fully in the present, knowing that every difficulty will pass and every moment of happiness is a gift to be cherished. Everything that happens is connected. Every action, thought, and word sends out ripples, shaping our future in ways we cannot always see. This is the essence of cause and effect, a natural law that governs all of existence. Imagine throwing a stone into a still lake. The ripples spread in every direction, altering the surface of the water. In the same way, everything we do leaves an imprint, affecting our lives and the lives of those around us. At times, it may seem like people act without consequences, that those who do wrong escape suffering while good-hearted individuals face endless hardships. But the effects of our actions do not always manifest immediately. Just as some seeds sprout quickly, while others take years to bear fruit, the impact of our choices unfolds in its own time. Every experience we face, whether positive or painful, is a reflection of the seeds we have planted, shaped by past actions and present decisions. This understanding gives us great power. We are not victims of fate, but the architects of our own reality. If we are surrounded by negativity, it is not by accident. If we experience joy and peace, it is not mere luck. We have the ability to shape our future with the actions we take today. By choosing to be kinder in our words, more patient in our thoughts, and more compassionate in our actions, we begin to create a life filled with harmony rather than conflict, fulfillment rather than suffering. One of the greatest misunderstandings is believing that happiness comes from external things, people, success, wealth. But nothing external is permanent. And when we tie our happiness to things that can change, we set ourselves up for suffering. True peace does not come from grasping or possessing. It comes from learning to enjoy the present moment without fear of losing it. Attachment is the root of suffering. We cling to relationships, believing they define us. We hold on to possessions, fearing life without them. We become attached to ideas, convinced that our beliefs are the only truth. But nothing in life is truly ours to keep. Everything is borrowed. Our possessions, our loved ones, even our own bodies. Learning to appreciate without attachment, to love without trying to control, to let go without resistance. This is the path to inner freedom. Imagine holding onto a rope that is being pulled away from you. The harder you grip, the more painful it becomes. But the moment you let go, the struggle ends. This is how attachment works. We suffer not because things change, but because we refuse to let them. When we learn to loosen our grip, we find a peace that does not depend on external circumstances. Life does not always go according to plan. From childhood, we are taught to chase goals, to fight for what we want, to resist when things do not unfold as expected. But rarely are we taught the power of acceptance, the ability to embrace life as it is, rather than as we wish it to be. True peace comes not from controlling life, but from learning to move with it. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It does not mean we stop striving or settle for less. It means seeing things clearly, without resistance or denial. So much of our suffering comes not from what happens, but from our refusal to accept it. If someone lets us down, we hold on to anger. If life takes a different turn, we dwell on disappointment. But what if, instead of resisting, we trusted that every experience, good or bad, is shaping us into who we are meant to be? A wise teacher once told a story of a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors lamented his misfortune, but the farmer simply said, "Who knows if this is good or bad?" Days later, the horse returned with several wild horses, and the neighbors rejoiced at his luck. Again, the farmer said, "Who knows if this is good or bad?" Later, his son broke his leg while trying to tame one of the wild horses. The neighbors grieved for him, but the farmer remained calm, repeating the same words. Soon after, the army came to the village to recruit young men for war. But they left the farmer's son behind because of his injury. What seemed like misfortune turned into a blessing. Life is full of hidden lessons, and only with time can we see the bigger picture. Every experience carries wisdom, even the painful ones. A failed relationship teaches us independence. A loss reminds us to appreciate the present. A disappointment redirects us towards something better. Nothing is meaningless if we choose to see it as an opportunity for growth. Pain is not the enemy. It is a teacher. When something hurts us, it reveals where we need to grow. If we are deeply affected by criticism, it may be a sign to strengthen our self-worth. If loss devastates us, perhaps we need to learn to let go with love. Every difficult emotion shows us something about ourselves, and when we face these emotions with awareness, they become stepping stones toward wisdom. Imagine fire refining gold, burning away impurities to reveal its true essence. In the same way, our struggles burn away what is unnecessary, shaping us into something stronger, wiser, more compassionate. Suffering is not meant to break us, but to transform us. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" This simple shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of feeling like a victim, you become a student of life. Instead of being trapped in pain, you turn suffering into growth. The mind is a powerful force. It can be our greatest ally or our biggest source of suffering. The way we interpret life shapes our experience. Two people can go through the same hardship, yet one emerges stronger, while the other remains stuck in bitterness. The difference is in the mind. Through self-awareness, we can learn to stop reacting to life and start responding with clarity. We can train ourselves to observe our emotions without being controlled by them, to find peace not by eliminating difficulties, but by transforming our relationship with them. Happiness is not found in the future, nor is it lost in the past. It exists only in this moment, in how we choose to see the world, in our ability to embrace life exactly as it is. The journey to peace does not begin somewhere outside of us. It begins within. There comes a time when you must stop running from your past, running from your thoughts, running from the silence that waits when everything else fades. Most people spend their lives avoiding themselves, filling every empty moment with distractions, with noise, with anything that keeps them from sitting alone with their own mind. But what if solitude was not something to fear, but something to embrace? What if, in the quiet, you found the answers you have been searching for? Buddhism teaches that the greatest wisdom comes not from the world, but from within. Everything you need to know, every insight, every realization is already inside you. But you cannot hear it if you are constantly drowning it out with external noise. The mind is like a still lake. When it is disturbed, the reflection is distorted. But when it is calm, everything becomes clear. Only in stillness can you see yourself as you truly are. Many people are uncomfortable being alone because they believe that their worth is tied to their interactions, to their relationships, to the validation they receive from others. They define themselves by how many people surround them, by how much attention they receive, by how much they are needed. But who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when there is no one to impress, no one to validate you, no one to define you? The truth is, the fear of solitude is not a fear of being alone. It is a fear of facing yourself. Because in solitude, there are no distractions to shield you from your thoughts, no external voices to drown out your inner truth. You are left with only yourself. And if you do not know yourself, if you have spent your life avoiding your own mind, that silence can feel unbearable. But what if you saw solitude not as emptiness, but as an opportunity? An opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to understand your thoughts, to listen to the voice within you that has been waiting to be heard. What if you stopped fearing the silence and started embracing it? The world tells you that happiness is found in external things, in relationships, in achievements, in wealth. But Buddhism teaches that true happiness is found in stillness. When you detach from the need for external validation, when you stop chasing things that can be taken away, you discover something deeper. A kind of peace that is not fragile, that does not depend on circumstances, that cannot be lost. Imagine carrying a heavy bag filled with things you believe you need: recognition, approval, success, security. You have been carrying this weight for years, believing that if you let go of even one thing, you will lose your worth. But what if the weight was never necessary? What if everything you were searching for was already within you? The moment you set the bag down, the moment you release the need for external things to complete you, you realize that you were never lacking. You were only carrying burdens that were never yours to hold. Letting go is not about giving up. It is about freeing yourself. Freeing yourself from expectations that no longer serve you, from beliefs that keep you trapped, from the idea that your happiness depends on anything outside of yourself. When you stop searching for happiness in the future, you begin to find it in the present. But how do you let go? How do you stop seeking validation? How do you learn to be content in your own presence? The answer is not in forcing yourself to detach, but in shifting your perspective, in seeing solitude as a gift rather than a punishment, in recognizing that true confidence is not found in being admired, but in being at peace with yourself. Start by paying attention to how often you avoid silence. Notice how quickly you reach for your phone, how often you fill empty spaces with distractions. Ask yourself, what am I trying to escape? What am I afraid of facing? And then, instead of running, sit with it. Observe your thoughts without judgment. Allow yourself to feel what you've been avoiding. Journaling is one of the most powerful ways to do this. Writing allows you to bring your thoughts into the open, to process emotions that have been buried, to understand yourself in a way that is impossible when you are constantly distracted. Meditation is another tool. By simply sitting in silence, by focusing on your breath, you learn to observe your mind without attachment. You realize that your thoughts are not reality. They are just passing clouds in the sky of your mind. But solitude is not just about stillness. It is also about creation. When you stop seeking validation, you gain the freedom to live for yourself. What excites you? What do you love to do? Not because others approve, but because it brings you joy. When you stop living for others, you start discovering what truly makes you happy. Think of the great thinkers, the great artists, the great visionaries throughout history. Many of them spent long periods in solitude, not because they rejected the world, but because they understood that the greatest insights come in stillness. They were not afraid to be alone with their thoughts, to explore their inner world, to find inspiration in the silence. But in order to reach this place, you must first break the habit of constant distraction. You must stop seeking external things to complete you. Because the truth is, the more you look outside of yourself for happiness, the further you move away from it. When you are dependent on others for your sense of self, you are always at risk. When your happiness is tied to things that can change, you will always live in fear of losing them. Imagine standing in a storm, the wind howling, the rain pouring down. Most people try to fight the storm, trying to control the rain, trying to hold on to things that are being swept away. But what if, instead of resisting, you simply stood still? What if you let the storm pass, trusting that it would not last forever? Because this is the nature of all things. They pass. No feeling is permanent. No pain lasts forever. The more you accept this, the more peace you will find. Ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped running? If you stopped filling every moment with distractions and simply allowed yourself to be? What would you find in the silence? What parts of yourself have you been avoiding? And what if, instead of fearing those parts, you met them with understanding? Most people believe that they need to hold on to things to be safe. That if they stop worrying, they will lose control. That if they stop seeking validation, they will become invisible. But holding on does not bring security. It brings suffering. Worrying does not prevent the future. It only robs you of the present. Seeking validation does not make you worthy. It only makes you dependent. True freedom comes when you realize that you do not need anything outside of yourself to be complete, that you are whole, even in solitude. That happiness is not something you find. It is something you uncover. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you are no longer afraid of being alone. That solitude is no longer something to endure, but something you cherish. That your happiness is no longer tied to anyone else. That you are at peace simply being. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by learning to enjoy your own company, by understanding that solitude is not loneliness, it is freedom. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are enough. You have always been enough. And the more you embrace your own presence, the more you will realize that happiness was never something you had to search for. It was always within you, waiting to be seen. There comes a time when you must stop waiting. Waiting for happiness. Waiting for love. Waiting for the moment when everything will fall into place. The truth is, life is happening now. Every second you spend wishing for the future or clinging to the past is a second lost. But most people do not realize this until much later, until they look back and see how much time they spent waiting for a happiness that was always within their reach. Buddhism teaches that the key to peace is not found in chasing what is missing, but in fully embracing what is already here. Many people believe that happiness will come when they finally achieve something, when they find the right partner, when they reach a certain level of success, when they have more money, more recognition, more security. But this kind of happiness is fragile because it is always tied to something external. And anything external can be taken away. True happiness, the kind that does not fade with circumstances, is the kind that comes from within. It is the kind that does not rely on achievements, on approval, on things going exactly as planned. It is the kind that exists even when life is uncertain. Imagine carrying a cup with a small hole at the bottom. No matter how much water you pour into it, it will never be full. This is what happens when you tie your happiness to external things. You may feel joy for a moment, but it fades, and you are left searching for the next thing to fill the emptiness. But what if, instead of chasing things to fill the cup, you focused on fixing the hole? What if you stopped looking outside of yourself and started cultivating happiness from within? The way to do this is by shifting your perspective. Instead of always asking, "What is missing?" start asking, "What is already here?" Instead of focusing on what you lack, focus on what you have. Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to transform your mindset. When you begin to appreciate the small things, the warmth of the sun, the sound of laughter, the comfort of a quiet morning, you realize that happiness is not something waiting for you in the future. It is something that exists in every moment, if only you choose to see it. But most people are blind to this because they are too busy searching. They believe that something is missing, that they need more, that they must constantly strive for something greater. But Buddhism teaches that the path to happiness is not through gaining more. It is through needing less. It is through finding contentment in the simplicity of life, in the beauty of what is already present, in the ability to be fully immersed in the now. Ask yourself, how often do you truly experience the present moment? How often are you fully engaged in what you are doing, without thinking about what comes next, without replaying something from the past? Most people live in a constant state of distraction. Even when they are with loved ones, their minds are elsewhere. Even when they are experiencing something beautiful, they are thinking about capturing it instead of simply living it. But life is not happening in the past. It is not happening in the future. It is happening now. And the more you learn to be present, the more you realize that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was something you only had to notice. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools for developing presence. It teaches you to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, to bring your focus back to the now, to experience life without the constant pull of the past or future. Through meditation, you begin to see how much of your suffering is self-created, how much of your anxiety comes from things that are not even real. The mind is constantly weaving stories, replaying old events, worrying about things that may never happen. But when you learn to quiet the mind, when you learn to detach from these stories, you find a peace that is not dependent on circumstances. Imagine standing in a forest, watching the leaves fall. You do not try to catch them. You do not try to stop them from falling. You simply watch, allowing nature to move as it is meant to. This is how life should be lived. Not in resistance, not in attachment, but in trust. When you stop fighting against the flow of life, when you stop trying to control everything, you begin to experience a freedom that is unlike anything external success can provide. But letting go is not easy. The mind craves control. It wants certainty. It wants to hold on to things, believing that if it just tries hard enough, it can shape everything according to its desires. But control is an illusion. No matter how much you plan, no matter how much you try to force things to go your way, life will still unfold in ways you cannot predict. And the more you resist this, the more you suffer. The only way to truly find peace is to let go. Letting go does not mean giving up. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop attaching your happiness to specific outcomes. It means you stop resisting what is and start embracing what comes. It means you trust that even when things do not go as planned, life is still guiding you exactly where you need to be. Think of the ocean. The waves rise and fall. The tides come and go, but the ocean itself remains. Your peace should be like that, unshaken by the changing tides of life, unmoved by the temporary ups and downs. The world will always be unpredictable. There will always be things outside of your control, but the one thing you can control is how you respond. The more you learn to trust, the more you learn to flow with life instead of against it, the more peace you will find. Ask yourself, what are you still holding on to that is causing you pain? What thoughts, what fears, what expectations are keeping you from being fully present? And what would happen if just for a moment you let them go? Most people believe that if they let go, they will lose something important. But the truth is, when you let go, you gain something even greater. Freedom. Freedom from worry. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the belief that your happiness depends on things outside of yourself. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, that you no longer need things to be perfect in order to feel at peace, that you are content, not because everything in your life is exactly as you want it to be, but because you have learned to find joy in the present, to embrace life as it is. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by practicing gratitude, by learning to let go of control, by choosing to be present. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are enough. You have always been enough. And the more you embrace the now, the more you will realize that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was always within you, waiting to be seen. There comes a moment when you must stop seeking happiness in places it was never meant to be found. The world has taught you that joy comes from achievement, from relationships, from the approval of others. But what happens when those things disappear? What happens when success fades, when people change, when circumstances shift beyond your control? If your peace is tied to things that are temporary, your happiness will always be fragile. But true peace, the kind that cannot be taken away, comes from learning to be content within yourself, no matter what is happening around you. Most people spend their lives chasing something, believing that if they just reach a certain goal, if they just gain a certain amount of recognition, they will finally feel whole. But Buddhism teaches that wholeness is not something you find. It is something you remember. It is something that has always been within you, waiting to be uncovered. The more you attach your happiness to external things, the more you move away from this truth. But the moment you stop searching, the moment you turn inward, you realize that everything you were looking for was already here. Imagine a person wandering through a vast desert, searching desperately for water. They travel miles, exhausted, believing that if they just keep moving, they will eventually find what they need. But what they do not realize is that they have been carrying a full canteen the entire time. They have been searching for something they already had, simply because they never stopped to look within. This is how most people live, constantly searching for happiness in the future, never realizing that it was always available in the present. The key to happiness is not in having more, it is in needing less. The world tells you that the answer to your problems is always something external. A new job, a new relationship, a new achievement. The more lost you become, the more you chase, the further away it seems. But when you stop, when you become still, when you turn inward, you realize that happiness was never something to be found. It was something that was always here, waiting to be recognized. Most people do not know how to simply be. They live in a constant state of distraction, always moving from one thing to the next, believing that if they just achieve more, acquire more, experience more, they will finally feel complete. But Buddhism teaches that true contentment does not come from having more. It comes from wanting less. It comes from the ability to sit in stillness, to be fully present, to see life exactly as it is without needing it to be anything different. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with everything you think you need to be happy. Success, relationships, recognition, material possessions. You carry this weight everywhere you go, believing that each item in the bag is essential, that without them, you will be empty. But what if, instead of adding more, you started removing? What if, one by one, you let go of the things you thought you needed, only to realize that the lighter you became, the freer you felt? This is the essence of letting go, not a loss, but a release. Not emptiness, but space. The space to finally breathe, to finally see clearly, to finally realize that you were never lacking in the first place. The mind is always searching, always wanting something more. It clings to the past. It worries about the future. It tells you that if you just had this or that, you would finally be happy. But have you ever noticed that the moment you get what you wanted, the mind immediately moves to the next thing? It is never satisfied. It always finds something else to chase. This is why external happiness is so fleeting, because it is built on a foundation that is always shifting. True happiness, the kind that lasts, does not come from getting what you want. It comes from realizing that you do not need to chase anything at all. Ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped trying to control everything? What if, instead of resisting life, you trusted it? What if, instead of trying to force things to go your way, you allowed them to unfold naturally? Most suffering comes not from what happens, but from our refusal to accept it. We create pain by clinging to expectations, by wishing things were different, by believing that happiness can only exist if everything goes exactly as we want it to. But life does not work this way. Life is unpredictable. It is always changing, always shifting, always moving in ways we cannot control. The more we try to fight it, the more exhausted we become. But the moment we let go, the moment we stop resisting, we find peace. Think of a river flowing down a mountain. The water does not try to control its path. It does not resist the rocks in its way. It moves around them effortlessly, adapting, flowing, trusting that it will always find its way. This is how life is meant to be lived, not in resistance, but in flow. The more you try to hold on to things that are meant to change, the more you suffer. But when you learn to move with life instead of against it, you experience a freedom that most people never will. But how do you let go when your mind is so used to holding on? How do you stop worrying when fear has been your companion for so long? The answer is not in forcing yourself to forget, but in seeing things differently, in realizing that control is an illusion, that attachment creates suffering, that the only thing you ever truly have is this moment. When you stop trying to control the future, when you stop dwelling on the past, you create space for peace to enter. Meditation is one of the most powerful ways to train your mind in this practice. It teaches you to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, to step back and see that your worries are just passing clouds, not something you have to hold on to. Through meditation, you learn that the mind is always moving, always trying to pull you into a story. But you do not have to believe every thought that arises. You can choose to simply watch, to let go, to rest in the stillness beneath the noise. Imagine sitting in a quiet forest, watching the leaves fall from the trees. You do not try to stop them. You do not try to hold on to them. You simply watch, knowing that it is the nature of leaves to fall, that new ones will grow in their place. This is how you must learn to see life. Everything is temporary. Your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences. The more you cling, the more you suffer. But when you accept the impermanence of all things, you find peace. But letting go is not about detachment in the way most people think. It does not mean you stop caring, that you stop feeling, that you remove yourself from the world. It means you love without possession, that you experience without attachment, that you appreciate without needing to hold on to anything. True detachment is not about escaping life. It is about being fully present in it, without the need to control. Ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is keeping you from peace? What expectations, what fears, what beliefs are keeping you trapped in a cycle of suffering? And what would happen if just for a moment you let them go? Most people believe that if they let go, they will lose something important. But the truth is, when you let go, you gain something even greater. Freedom. Freedom from worry. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the belief that you need anything outside of yourself to be happy. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you no longer need to prove yourself to anyone. that you no longer need to chase, to control, to cling. That you are content, not because everything in your life is perfect, but because you have finally stopped resisting, finally stopped searching, finally realized that peace was never something outside of you. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by learning to embrace change, by trusting that even when things do not go as planned, you are exactly where you are meant to be. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are enough. You have always been enough. And the more you surrender to the flow of life, the more you will realize that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was always within you, waiting to be seen. There comes a moment when you must ask yourself, what are you truly searching for? Why do you keep looking for something outside of yourself, as if the answers to your deepest questions can be found anywhere but within? The truth is, you have been conditioned to believe that happiness, peace, and fulfillment are things that must be earned, things that exist somewhere in the future, waiting for you to reach them. But Buddhism teaches that nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added to you. The happiness you seek is not in the next achievement, the next relationship, the next phase of life. It is already within you, waiting to be realized. Most people spend their lives chasing an illusion. They believe that once they have more money, more success, more recognition, they will finally feel whole. But the reality is, the moment they get what they wanted, they immediately begin searching for the next thing. This is the nature of the mind. It is never satisfied. It always finds something else to chase. But what if, instead of running, you stopped? What if you sat in stillness and asked yourself, what if I already have everything I need? Imagine a person who spends their entire life searching for treasure, traveling to distant lands, digging through endless fields, only to one day realize that the treasure was buried beneath their own home all along. This is how most people live. They search for happiness outside of themselves, never realizing that it was always within them, hidden beneath layers of distractions, fears, and false beliefs. The journey is not about finding something new. It is about uncovering what was always there. But how do you uncover this? How do you stop chasing and start seeing? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice how often your mind pulls you into the past or the future. Notice how much time you spend dwelling on regrets or worrying about things that have not yet happened. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I simply focused on right now? What would happen if, instead of looking for happiness in the future, I allowed myself to experience it in this moment? Most people believe that happiness is something to be earned, something that only comes after they have proven themselves, after they have achieved enough, after they have fixed everything that is wrong with their lives. But happiness is not a reward. It is a state of being. It is not something you arrive at, but something you cultivate by changing the way you see the world. Gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to shift your perspective. When you focus on what is missing, you create suffering. But when you focus on what is already here, you create joy. No matter where you are in life, there is always something to be grateful for. The ability to breathe, to see, to hear, to experience another day. These are gifts that so many overlook. But when you start appreciating the small things, you realize that happiness is not found in grand achievements, but in the quiet moments of everyday life. But happiness is not just about appreciation. It is also about letting go. So much of our suffering comes from holding on to things that are meant to pass. We cling to relationships, believing they define us. We hold on to expectations, believing life must unfold in a certain way. We replay old memories, unable to accept that they are gone.